Let's get right into it. PlayStation, the next PlayStation.
PS4.
PS4, whatever the hell they're going to call it. A lot of rumors hitting the internet yesterday. Kotaku got their hands on a leak, quote unquote. I'm just sorry. I've become so numb and desensitized to all these next generation console rumors.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to take any of them seriously. But again, this one comes out. It says that the next PlayStation will hit the market in 2013. I don't think that'll happen, personally. Supposedly it's named Orbis, codename Orbis, which just doesn't mean anything to anybody either because it's going to be called PlayStation 4 or whatever. But the real details are what sort of, I guess, making people talk.
Mm-hmm.
It will supposedly only lock games into a single PlayStation Network account. There will be no backwards compatibility. So any PlayStation 3 game that you have on a disc doesn't sound like it'll be able to be played on the PlayStation 4. And the most shocking of all, it will have some sort of technology built into it that will prevent you from playing a used video game. Okay, so the ramifications of that final detail are endless. Not only does it in one full swoop just completely eliminate things like GameFly, and things like GameStop. You ever hear of that? Multi-billion-dollar chain. So I don't know. I think what do you think, Handler? What do you think that this is really sort of? No one knows if it's all confirmed or true. Right. Sony's not confirming or denying. What do you think this sort of means for the future of gaming?
I mean, I think the reason behind it goes to the conversation we're having before is largely because, Sony is always like a leader in terms of DRM.
Yeah.
They have the most prolific Blu-ray player, which is the PS3. They implement Navy amongst other things first. When the PS3 was hacked, I think that scared them, and that's why that they, with the PS4, with these particular rumors, they want to make it as locked down as possible. But I think the ramifications are, it's really, really bad. It's getting to the point where it's so much more strict than what we would consider, with movies or Blu-rays, and they've always sort of been on par. When Blockbuster, when going to the store and renting a movie was probably you always go and rent a game, and do that. Now you're at the point where, well, you can rent movies or you can do this or do that, but you can't do that with games.
Of course.
So I think that's a concern.
Yeah.
Especially with the cost of games, because a movie is cheaper. You might be able to see it in the theater first or do something, but when you buy a game, and the reason that things like GameFly, it's a big investment. You want to be able to play it to see if you like it, and it's not like necessarily a movie where you watch it once. If you really like it, you might watch it a couple times, but the game has a ton of replay value too.
For sure.
So it's not like by allowing people to rent games, people are not going to then go and buy it. It's a completely different dynamic.
Don't you think that by preventing and pretty much ending all kinds of used games and sharing and stuff like that, I mean, I think they are severely underestimating how much of an impact this will have on people's decision to buy games at all. If I'm buying a $60 game, a part of me is saying, hey, worst case scenario, if I don't like this thing, I'm just going to trade it back in and get half my money back at the very least, or sell it on eBay and maybe get back 90% of my money. That mentality is such a contributing factor to somebody buying a video game from the get-go that I feel like that, decision workflow has not been considered by the people potentially making these decisions.
Yeah,
to the point where
tons of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the best advertising for the game is renting it. I mean, you get to basically try it. You play it for a couple days, and then you get to figure out if you want to buy it.
Right.
Same thing you're saying in terms of resale value or selling. There's lots of little markets or lots of little things that people do before they buy a game that you're completely eliminating. And price-wise, I mean, with iOS or Android, you can buy games for significantly cheaper. Granted, it's not like on a console,
right?
But I think that moves, people's mentality on what the dollar value of games should be.
For sure.
You're seeing it a little bit with like Vita too.
Oh, Vita's so locked down.
Well, in terms of price, that you're going to pay for those games versus, I go to the App Store and I'll buy this for this price. So it's interesting.
I bring that up with the lockdown thing because the Vita is super locked down.
Yes.
Transferring a movie file from your computer to it is brain surgery. I mean, it's easy enough, but it's just tedious, and the workflow takes a lot of time. But also think about it, like growing up, right? When you were playing Nintendo or Sega, whatever it was, and you're like, okay, dude, I'll come over and I'll bring over my copy of Sonic and we'll go play. Like, that is a huge part of your growing up and your childhood with gaming. Like, this sort of sees that coming to an end.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's a big deal. Like, I'm sure you did stuff like that growing up. Like, hey, man, bring over your copy of Jet Moto. We'll race. It'll be sick, bro. You know,
you'll still be able to do that with this non-use policy.
No,
you can
won't.
still bring your game over to somebody else.
It'll
only work in the player that you
initially
register.
it doesn't, because that's technically a used game.
Yeah, so basically matches, I guess, with one particular console, and then
it'll
you're
like
done.
solidify. I don't know.
You could bring your console over.
Yeah, you
but
could bring your
that's-
console over, or maybe they'll have some sort of thing where you can sign in on someone else's console and then pop them out.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll
Like
work.
register with your PS
I mean, do you
ID.
really think they'll just eliminate that pure sort of experience of sharing a game
Well,
with somebody?
I mean, I think the bigger question, and we are talking about this a little bit before, is why? Why are they doing this? Is it do they feel like it's going to generate more revenue in terms of games, or is it strictly a means to further lock it down because they don't want it to be hacked? And I think it's the latter because, as we've discussed, you don't generate more revenue this way.
Yeah, and that's the perplexing thing about it. It's like, why are they doing it? It can't be they clearly cannot think, they cannot rationally think that this will equal more money. They can't think that way. I can't see that happening.
Well, yeah, and I think in terms
because
of,
even with used games and stuff, right? The way it's set up now, if I buy a used game from GameStop and I go home and I want to play online, and it's a used game that's like an EA game that requires a pass to play online, I got to pay another $10. That's money being generated right there. DLC, stuff like that.
I think that piracy is definitely a problem, but I think it's much more so in terms of music and movies than games. It's out there, but the level of sophistication you need in order to be able to do that is much greater. So I can't imagine that that's particularly hurting Sony and the video game developers enough to limit ordinary consumers into kind of doing some of the behaviors we discussed.
Yeah, it's really scary. I feel like the second, and it's not just games, it's books, it's movies, it's music. I don't know what it was. Like the second that you were able to buy something that wasn't tangible, that wasn't in your hand, right? The second like this CD is gone and it's just zeros and ones on a drive somewhere, we lost a right. We lost like a possessional right. And with that comes this sort of thing like it's all rented now and it's all sort of virtual. Me personally, I think the future of games right now is like subscription-based stuff. I think like what Call of Duty does, how they have like the elite membership where it's like $50 a year and you're a Call of Duty player for $50 a year. You're going to get all this continued follow-up digital content. You're going to get all that, but it's for a price of a year. And that sort of just eliminates used games because no one like wants to give away a game once they remember.
Right.
I feel like that's where we're going. Whether or not that's the right way,
I mean, what do you think about that? I don't think that's completely unreasonable. Especially,
I don't think it's the worst thing in the world.
Especially if you're signing up with the expectation that you're going to get new content. It's going to be enhanced.
It's going to be
more maps
for
or
sure.
whatever.
I think that subscription sort of thing, that's probably the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, I mean, there's development time that has to go into making those modifications.
For sure.
So I don't have a problem with that, especially if you could sign in on your home console and then go to a friend's house and be able to do it there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's reasonable.
It's interesting. Tell us what you think. 866-44-CNET.